Japan, Korea, China, the respect, the reverence that they place on Western cultural practices, Western forms, be it orchestra, classical music, dance, is at the level that actually supplants local indigenous expressions, which are considered folkloric and of a lower order. But that is quite a natural thing when there's a certain supremacy through communication, through practices, through social structures, that you borrow and you assimilate the dominant culture. But of late, Asian economies have strengthened, and with it a greater confidence about their own cultural identities. And this is the interesting time now, because what is that identity? Cultures that were forged and evolved hundreds of years ago, whilst they had influence from around them, but not to the extent of today. So where one who was pure or purer, with all these influences now, within one person, within one society, there's so many aspects of us. Even if you're French, because of immigration, you're intermingling with already different cultures. Because of media, you're influenced with also other cultures, with foods, with practices. So in one person, in one day, you could be exposed to so many different practices. And that influences you in the art you make, and also the judgments and the values that you develop. Right? So Asia is at a time where, although we are steep in heritage and history, but we have a greater modern day influence on us. So moving forward, we ask ourselves, how do we evolve, our cultures that is relevant to modern day life? So if you look at traditional arts practices, unlike in Europe, I guess, or maybe Europe, for instance, there is a tension now between preserving, what's past and old, versus the young who don't really care for it. Who decides? Governments are now, and I guess some societies are saying, we need to preserve. But if through time, less and less people care about its preservation, then those practices will die. And this is the irony for Western classical music. Asia actually is the biggest hope to continue that legacy. Because it's become an international, universal inheritance rather than specific to Europe. But then for Asian practices, for instance, Beijing opera or Indian dance forms, some of the younger, generations don't immediately relate to these. So what's to happen of those traditions? So if you then come to Singapore is a melting pot of all these different cultures or civilizations. I'll say that Singapore has 4 great civilizations that has taken root here for hundreds of years. Although we have a short history, modern day history, we are actually long in heritage. The Chinese, the Indians, the Europeans, and the Malay Arab. Because this is through the sea trade that has brought all of us together. In many ways, and we don't even recognize this perhaps as well, we were the more early day cosmopolitan city. So a lot of the practices here that we take for granted, new cities are beginning to learn to adjust. London, Paris, Toronto, because of immigration, you get now, it's a more modern day phenomenon. For Singapore, it has always been that way. We have always been diverse cultures. So I guess we are one of the early cosmopolitan global cities. But what that means is that when the people came, the Chinese who came here, they came for, they were not specifically cultured people. They came to seek employment. Yeah? These were, workers, traders, businessmen. So the cultural practices they brought with them are very different from the high art forms. That, from where they come from is a different, different level. And that actually becomes our traditional arts. So the traditional arts of the Chinese here, for instance, what we call our tradition, is just one small part of what is Chinese. There are many things that we can't relate. But what has evolved here has also evolved differently from China. So we've created our own unique traditions. And we have many. We have the Indians, the South Indians, the Chinese from different provinces, the different Europeans. So in modern day history, with all these practices, modern day Singaporean decided I borrow from the rest of the world, not just my heritage. And in some ways that is a bit troubling because it also means that there are no roots. The expressions we've developed are borrowed from everywhere but not from deep inside. So Singapore, like many other cities, we are also in search of our own unique identity. And to do that, we realize that we need to reconnect with our very colorful heritage, our past. So this is exactly what's happening now. We are rediscovering our past in order for us to be able to look into the future. It's an interesting phenomenon because in many other societies you don't look back in the past. You don't want to be enslaved by it. But here we are looking back in the past not so much to be enslaved by it, but for us to better understand our DNA. So for instance, as a Asian dancer, even if we do a modern form of ballet, our physique, our body language, body type, is very different. How we walk the streets are different. So that influences the way we would naturally express ourselves through movement. So if we were to take ballet lessons with our own dance forms and movement, and we wanted to contemporize, it would be very different. So we are trying to find those new pathways which is genuine and authentic for us, rather than merely borrowing someone else's expressions. That is important to root a community, because otherwise there are no bonds. And that's something that we are evolving as a city-state, as an economy, to a nation.